On this episode of the Facility Playbook, I got to sit down with Terry Keith of Double Tap KC. This entertainment virtual reality bar lives in the heart of the riverfront in Kansas City, Missouri. And what I loved about this was he opened an amazing concept. Years and years later, realized that he needed to add food. And so we got to really talk about the challenges behind that, what he learned, what he failed at, and how he's been succeeding. Hope you enjoy this episode with Double Tap KC. Do you own or manage a facility? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Facility Playbook. I'm Luke Wade, founder and CEO of Facility Ally, and this podcast is about helping facility managers and owners learn from pioneers and veterans in the industry who have already built and managed successful sports facilities, entertainment venues, and clubs. Did you know that most of the facilities I just mentioned use between 4 and 6 different softwares to manage their reservations, memberships, leagues, lessons, camps, clinics, and more? Revolutionize your facility with Facility Ally's all-in-one system. Learn more at facilityally.com. And today, we're at a really cool entertainment venue. I'm joined today by Terry Keith, owner and operator of Double Tap KC. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, man.
Tell us a little bit about, what you got, how you got here. Tell us about your background and what led you to the point you're at today.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting story, but I worked in and out of different, if you will, like restaurants, bars, things of that nature, all through like high school and then into college as well. And then after I graduated college, I went to a company, if you're from Kansas City, most people know, but Cerner, it's now Oracle. I was there for about 7.5 years, so on the tech side of things. So I've always had like a niche, if you will, or a knack for like technology and want to learn more about it. And Cerner kind of gave me that opportunity to really dive into it. And then I played virtual reality for the first time, and it just absolutely blew my mind. And I'm like, how is nobody talking about this, man? It's just mind-blowing to me that there's not more places around here. And so I played it, and then that was where the iterations of the concept started taking place. It was like, how can we make this a fun venue that multiple people can go to, enjoy without breaking the bank, but still allow them to enjoy, this new age tech, if you will.
That's awesome. So a little bit of combination of your background in the hospitality world, some technology, and then just pure enjoyment of virtual reality. So tell me what Double Tap KC is today.
Yeah, it's obviously like from where we started back in June of 2020 to where we are today, it's kind of morphed into what our customer base is like really kind of told us they want us to be. But to break it down, Double Tap is a virtual reality arcade and sports bar. So VR being the primary focus, you have your own private base. Think of like a Topgolf or a bowling alley where you have that space and you rent it by the hour with a group of people and split the cost. Same concept, except we do it with VR instead. So our smallest bay is going to have 2 headsets. Our largest bay has 5 headsets, up to 15 people. We obviously have like a sports lounge for you to enjoy your local sports or even, any other sporting venue sport that you would like to watch. Full bar, full kitchen as well. Classic arcades. So we got a little bit of something for everybody.
So I'm going to ask the question I think I asked you years ago when I first met you was, why would I come in here and play this and not just use, one of my VR headsets at home? What's the difference?
Yeah, the biggest difference is the playing with your friends, because most people, even though they do have a VR headset at home, the space for more than one headset is the piece that really sets us apart, right? VR takes up a lot of space. At a minimum, if a standing room only is a 6x6 space, doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking, you're flailing your arms, you're swinging, you have more than one of those headsets in an area, like it gets pretty dangerous, right? But then the other side of what makes Double Tap unique is the vibe. It's the atmosphere. So you can play the VR with your friends, get a drink, grab food, enjoy some great music at the same time.
So, and it's a lot higher quality, right? Like, isn't there's a lot more behind it as well?
Sorry, yeah.
You're good. No, you're good.
That's a great question, yes.
I'm sure you talk about this every day, but for most people, they don't realize that you guys have this amazing VR quality and like high-end stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's from even when we talked, several years ago to where it is today. I mean, it's ever changing, right? But these are PC-powered headsets. So most people are familiar with the Oculus Quest or the Meta Quest 2. It's a white headset. Everybody is familiar with that. You can plug those into a PC, but the difference of barrier of entry, that headset is around $300-$400 now. the headsets that we operate are 1,500, plus you have to buy the PC. So you're going to much higher resolution, refresh rate. Like overall, the graphics are better because it's powered by a PC graphics card. So you're talking $3,000 entry for a single headset.
That's awesome. And so when you first played VR, like, did you immediately know you wanted to open a place, or why did you end up deciding, hey, I'm going to open a VR bar?
Yeah, actually, the VR bar, it just happened, right? So my background or my degree was in entrepreneurship and business management. So I always knew that I wanted to be, I was always had that entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, and I wanted to own a business. I just didn't know what. And I feel like as I get older and I'm more into this business, like I definitely overcomplicate certain things. So, that model of keep it simple is something that I'm learning the hard way. But I always wanted to open a business, but when I played VR for the first time, that was where the wheels really started turning, and it became like, okay, I think we can make something of this. And so that's the different iterations came to be. And then we opened Double Tap in June of 2020.
That's awesome. Not awesome that it opened in COVID.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about like how that was and what kind of the timeline? Obviously, you started planning it before the pandemic.
Yes.
So maybe walk me through that story. When did you start planning it, and then how did it end up opening in the pandemic?
Yeah. So we started the planning. I played for the first time. I think it was like June of 2018 is when I played VR for the first time. And then the planning started from there. So bought a headset, bought a PC, and just started like, okay, this is cool. This can work, but what can we do with it that's not already been done? And that was where kind of the lane design came to be. But that was about 20 iterations before we landed on the current concept. But it was about 2 years of planning, trying to find a facility a location that could house us for the minimum amount of square footage that we needed in the price point. I mean, we're, a small business, and everything that I own was into this business. So finding that location, the square footage we need at the right price point, that took a year in and of itself. Putting the business plan together, I spent 6+ months, if not more than that, on that business plan. It was a 35-page document. I mean, I really went into it because with my life savings going into this, I didn't want to open a business I was going to sink all of that money into and not feel like I had all the tools necessary and all the data at a minimum to start off successful. You never know if it's going to work, especially with a brand new concept. So yeah, it was about 2 years. And then January hit, we started construction because this was just an empty warehouse. There was nothing in it. There was a garage door where our front door currently is. And I just love the warehouse feel, but it was just a blank canvas. So we started construction in January of 2020, and then February, March was when COVID hit, construction delays, and then we kept pushing through, but slowly but surely, and then June of that year is when we finally opened.
It's amazing that you were able to push through all that and still open in June. Kudos to you and the business plan. I never did any of that, and I wish I would have. So I'm glad that you were able to start that way. And I think I heard about you right after that, and we had met early on. And so, one of the things, I had the idea of was from the KC Crew side was starting a league. And so you guys run leagues. Let's talk a little bit about your leagues and how they work, because I know every time I tell somebody there's virtual reality leagues, they're like, what are you talking about? How does that even work? So maybe talk a little bit about the leagues.
Yeah, no, and I'll be honest with you. I'm going to fully give this guy credit right here for it, because you did reach out to me. It was like, hey, you ever thought about a league? And, starting a brand new business, my main thing was just like, man, we've got to get some revenue in the door. It's the middle of the pandemic when people aren't allowed inside at first when we first opened. I think we started our first league was August, September. It was the fall league is when we started with you guys. And so that really just kind of got the wheels turning, and this is possible to do, because I wasn't thinking about it at the time. It was like, I was just thinking like people play VR as a group, like our main core concept, but then, oh wait, we could do something else to drive up some revenue, and have people enjoy the VR, but in a competitive space. I hadn't thought about that. So our leagues have morphed a little bit since then. We're currently in a pause of our leagues because we're revamping how we do that. But yeah, so I think we have done 11 or 12 seasons of our league, and it's minimum 2v2 all the way up to a 4v4 league. It takes up obviously most of our headsets that we have in here. So we do it on a specific night where it's my lowest revenue night. Makes the most sense to have those people come in. Those headsets are in use, which is what we need, right? We want to make sure they're being in use about 6-7 days a week. So yeah, 2v2 or 4v4 league. What makes it hard in the VR space is there's only so many games that can support that number of headsets playing in the same game at the same time. Obviously, since we've opened, that's changed drastically. Like there's more developers pushing out content that can support large parties. But when we started our league, that wasn't the case. I had like maybe 2 or 3 games that we could do that with. So yeah, it's really just kind of changing, advertising, and yeah, I mean, the league has been a great success, but we put a little bit of a pause on it right now to try and, I always want to like make sure I'm offering a great experience for people. So that's why we're taking a little bit of a break.
Sure. And I think what I always tell people is exactly what you said, is leagues are gap fillers. And this is what Casey Crew has done for years, is like, give me your slowest night of the week and let me drive people in, right? Yeah. Like, pick a slow night, offer a league, and that's going to essentially get people guaranteed coming in every week for whatever time you decide to run your league. And so that's exactly the point of them. And then the other thing I loved about it is like, people are, concepting is like, you go to softball field and you play softball against another team. Virtual reality, you're doing the same thing. You're all coming in here, you're coming with your team of 4, your team of 2, and then we're all just playing in virtual reality against another team in another game that's also here. And so you get that cool experience of like the socializing, drinking at the bar, hanging out, talking to your team, the other team, and then you go into virtual reality and you play a game and you're able to, smack talk and do all that stuff in there. So it was one of my favorite things that we've ever created and been a part of. So I thought that was really, really cool. And I'm glad you were open to it, because not everybody's always open to it. When I have these crazy ideas, people are like, no, that'll never work. Or like, to your point, you could have said, no, we only have 2 games to do that on, right? But you were very open to that. And I thought it was one of the coolest things that I've been a part of.
No, it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, and I think like, I appreciate you coming, because like as entrepreneurs, like we've always got to try and push that boundary, right? And drive in revenue. But for me, it taught me, it's like, okay, well, let's challenge the status quo. Let's push outside of what I even thought this place was possible, or VR. And so it really morphed into something beautiful, but just out of nowhere. So yeah, it was great, man.
Where did the name Double Tap come from?
Great question. I get that a lot, actually. Initially, so Double Tap, if you're a gamer at all, was, and now because of Double Tap Zombieland, this was way after we were created, by the way. But yeah, it's obviously, you got to make sure that they're dead, right? So that was one side of it. The other side was, we knew we were going to have a bar, so multiple beers on tap. That was, those two kind of played together, the gaming aspect with the bar side of it.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't think I knew the bar side of it. That's awesome. So then obviously you got a bar, you got virtual reality. What are all the revenue generators, or what are all the ways that you essentially drive revenue in this business?
Yeah, no, so obviously the VR, the bar, the kitchen, and then we have memberships. So those 4, right there are really how we're driving in revenue. There's always different revenue streams, like during the pandemic, trying to get creative and drive in, different streams of revenue when customers were kind of skeptical of coming inside, especially trying something so new. Because when we first opened, VR, although it's been around for years, man, like it was still new to your average consumer. And so it was like, all right, what can we do differently? Well, during the pandemic, we did to-go VR. So you could rent a headset, take it home for 3 days, and then bring it back. We don't do that anymore, but yeah, that was
cool.
We were just trying to do anything and everything, because you had businesses that were doing to-go food and drink. We're like, okay, well, I didn't have a kitchen at the time. Well, we could talk about that later. That came after we opened, but we were doing to-go drinks. Nobody was doing it because it usually pairs well with food. So it's like, what else can we do to go to drive in revenue? That was where the to-go VR came into play.
So cool. I didn't know that you did that either. That's awesome. So when you were obviously researching and planning to build this, what are some of the things you learned from, were there other VR places that you kind of pulled ideas from, or did this all just come from you?
Funny enough, yes, there was another local place here in Kansas City I played VR in. As small businesses, we all work together one way or the other, right? So I played VR there for the first time. Went there twice, I want to say, and then that was where I took that and was like, okay, that's cool, but like, I have a large friend group, and we're always looking for something to do, which, like the concepts that you've come up with or people that you work with, it's like, okay, well, these large groups, what can we do together? And that was where essentially the concept came to be. Was I played that. It was more one-on-one in a headset, but I wanted to kind of flip it on its head and make it more of a group-based activity.
So obviously now you're almost 4 years into your business, 3 plus. There's other VR facilities that have opened around the country. What's something that makes Double Tap unique compared to some of these other facilities?
Good question. Yeah, it's our lane design. There are other places, well, 2 things, right? It's the lane design. So our smallest base, 2 headsets, up to 6 people in there, and you're splitting that cost. So our cost point on a weekend, it becomes $10 a person. That is palatable to your average consumer, especially in today's, economy. And so that was number one. I didn't want to break the bank for your average consumer that wants to enjoy a high-tech experience, as well as with our friend group. And then the other side was the bar. So at the time that we opened, there was maybe 2 places in the country that did VR and alcohol. My brother was first. He's like, you're about to do virtual reality and you're going to have people drink and get drunk. And I was like, yep, sounds about right. Yep, absolutely. Yes, we are. And it's kind of weird how it works, to be honest with you, because even if you're drinking, I've had some pretty intoxicated people jump in that headset, and all of a sudden they sober up because the zombies are coming at you. That adrenaline kicks in, and you're like, that person's just been drinking this whole time, and now they look perfectly normal. Then they take the headset off and they start stumbling again. But yeah, so those are the 2 things that really, I think, kind of make us unique.
So, bar, obviously, you started with a bar, like you mentioned, and the food came later. So maybe talk about how important, in contrast, you have VR. Obviously, that's the main driver. How important are the food and beverage side of things for you guys?
Yeah, it all works together, right? And that was the vision of the concept, right? Having all of that together in the same spot that everybody could enjoy. VR being first, and then the restaurant came about 1.5 years after we opened. I mentioned it already, my life savings was in this. I didn't have the money at the time to open a kitchen. So it's like, all right, well, let's get the place open. Let's proof the concept first with the VR and the drinking, and let's add the food. Well, now that we've added the food, people, especially if you've been drinking, playing, even if it's just finger foods, I want something to snack on. Otherwise they're going to leave or they're going to want to bring something else in. So once we brought the kitchen on, we've seen a significant jump in sales because you're keeping your guest here a little bit longer. They'll get that second drink, that third drink, versus before it was like, okay, we'll play VR for an hour, we'll grab a drink, now we need to go eat. So we've been able to kind of capture some of that revenue. But at the end of the day, we're also not a sit-down restaurant. So for me, over this past 1.5 years, it's really like not trying to compare us to full sit-down eat, restaurants. Because that's been the hardest part for me. But capturing those guests that are here when they're here, really just allowing them to purchase food and drink when they're here.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. Like, in my opinion, it's, leagues are gap fillers. Food are things that it keeps people here, right? So everybody's going to want to eat, especially if they've had too much to drink. They're like, hey, we need to go get something to eat. Well, the difference between them leaving and staying is you having food or something to offer them. So, which again, like you said, it just means more revenue, keeping those dollars here instead of them going somewhere else. I know there's challenges around that, but I tell every facility, like, you need to decide, to your point, right? You don't have to be this high-end restaurant and offer every menu and all these food and chef-driven items, right? It can be burgers, it can be hot dogs, it can be good food, again, just enough to keep them there to buy the next drink or stick around for more VR. And so I think it's really important for people to think about that. But it's also not super easy, even if you're keeping it low end. So you mentioned you had several issues with your kitchen, and, getting that in. And so maybe talk a little bit about the challenges there and your workarounds that you ended up finding.
Yeah, so the kitchen in of itself is another business. And I remember talking to a friend that, doesn't own it anymore, but Barkay, David at Barkay. He told me before I opened a kitchen, he said, it will be your biggest headache. And I said, man, get out of here. Like, I've worked in restaurants before. Like, no way, right? It is by far my biggest headache. And a lot of it's staffing, right? But when we first opened too, and to my wife's credit, and she's normally right, if I'm being honest, don't tell her I said that, but the menu was so big. Like, I was trying to compete with those big sit-down restaurants, trying to get people to come in and eat here. Well, that wasn't the focus. The VR is the focus. So we started with a huge menu. My turnaround time was crap. The quality of the product, because we have such a small kitchen with a large menu, we were trying to do too much in that kitchen. So it's been a learning experience in that regard, where we pared it down, and now we just focus on a high quality burger, fries, a couple other small menu items, really quick win items. That is good, because food is the first thing that people will leave a negative review out. I mean, if it's not quick, if it's not fresh, hot, like they're going to go leave that review. So that's really been the biggest learning curve for me, was like, be true to who you are, specialize in something, and understand your demographic, if you will, and what consumer base you're trying to capture. The other side, obviously, is the staffing. I mean, it's hard to get a good kitchen help. So the staffing and then the menu, just kind of learning who we are and where those fit into our demographic has been, I think, the biggest learning experience for me.
So would you say, if I'm a new facility or an existing facility similar to you, where I'm thinking of adding a kitchen or thinking of adding food, would you still say yes?
I would say yes, but just know it has your smallest margins. Obviously, your bar is going to be, your biggest margin, depending on your other offerings as well. It is, at the end of the day, a net positive, but you have to monitor that like a hawk, right? I mean, because with the margins being smaller there, The labor can kill you. Your food margins, if you have a lot of waste, do it. Just know your demographic, who you're trying to accomplish or trying to pull in from there. And then, really get that menu hammered down. I mean, that's really the biggest thing I've learned. And if I were to do it again, I would go through that really thoroughly, because I built the kitchen. Let's get it open, and I rushed it. And anytime I've ever rushed anything in this business, it's always come back to bite me in the butt, and I've had to circle back and redo it. Negative reviews. Okay, now why are we getting these reviews? And just kind of circle back and fix it, whereas I could have just done it right the first time.
Thank you for sharing that insight. I appreciate that. And every business fails, every entrepreneur, every facility fails. And so learning from our failures is the number one thing. It sounds like you're moving in that direction, which is great.
I hope so, man. Yeah.
Same. So what kind of memberships, you mentioned memberships earlier, what kind of memberships do you offer, and like what's included?
Yeah. So we are redoing the memberships, right? We've had this same membership since we've opened, but it was 8 hours of VR per month, and it was it's per headset per person, so it was $99 a month. The reason I'm revamping it, although people will pay that for a gym membership and things of that nature, in this space, it's kind of hard for some people to justify that, because like, what am I getting from it? I mean, yeah, it's fun, but it's not like a gym membership where I can see my health getting better and feeling that differently. So we're kind of revamping that. But yeah, it's 8 hours of VR for $100 a month. And that includes a discount on drinks and then a special members only drink menu.
Oh, okay, cool. What's the special members only drink menu? Can you tell us, because we're not members?
No, I mean, you just can't purchase it, right? Yeah, there's like 8 different drinks on there. One of them is a different iteration of our number one drink, which was the double tap that ass. You can blur that part out. But yeah, so it's a different flip on it. So yeah, we've got your old fashions and just different iterations of the drink menu that aren't all the ones that our consumers.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody offer a different drink menu as a membership. That's really cool. How did you come up with that?
It was interesting enough. This was a couple years ago, but I went to a place that cut my hair. It was right before one of my really good friends, his wedding. And so they had a bar in there, which I thought was kind of cool too. I was like, wait, I can grab a drink and get my hair cut. And then she handed me the wrong menu. I'd already been looking at it for about 5 minutes at this point. She come back. I was like, oh yeah, I want this. She's like, oh, sorry, that's our members only menu. And I was like, that's kind of interesting, and I really like it, right? So that was kind of where it came from. And yeah, I mean, people
haircut. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. That's a great. Never would have thought you would have taken that idea from like a barbershop.
I'd never thought they would have had a bar in there. That's why we went in the first place. Like, I can get my haircut and grab a drink at the same time. This is great.
That's awesome. That's so funny. So with the limited space that you have, obviously most of it's taken up by the VR and the lanes. Like, do you have issues with like overcrowding and people waiting in line, or how do you manage those sort of things?
That's why, like, hopefully, like at some point, for those that are watching this, you get a chance to kind of see high level of the facility. We learned as we went, because when we first opened, it was VR focused. I mean, we opened bare bones, man. I mean, we just had the basics in here. I didn't have the lounge space. I didn't have all these high top tables for people to sit. That overcrowding came there because I didn't have a place for people to sit and wait for their turn or after the VR experience. Where can I sit and chill? Because the people did want to stay. They really enjoyed the vibe. So I don't have a problem with that now, but we did in the beginning. And so that was part of the learning experience. Was after they were done, people were like, I really want to stay and I want to chill. So this used to be a lane right here. We got rid of that, and this is now our lounge space. And then now, with this year, we just added the patio. We had nothing out there, so we built the patio out there, and it allows people just kind of hang out a little bit longer.
Yep, people love that patio for sure. And you did a good job with it. It looks really, really nice. So back to the bar a little bit. You run specials every day. Talk a little bit about how you decide to run these specials, when you run them, and why you run them every day.
Yeah, there's a couple different, it depends on who you talk to as far as, the restaurant bar side of things. I guess maybe really any industry, but me being in this industry, depending on who you talk to, it's such a different ways of thinking. For me, some people will tell you don't run any specials, especially on your core product, because it devalues that product. And I understand that, but I have my slow period. So for me, it's like, okay, when is our peak times? When is not? That's when I decide to run my specials. So a lot of it is, the happy hour time frame, like that. We don't open till 4 during the weekday, so that 4 to 7 and then 7 o'clock on, that's when people are done eating, they're getting out and about, and so that allows them to come in, and I'm not discounting that product at that point. We do, other than the specials, we run events, right? So trivia, music bingo, things of that nature to pull people in. And we'll maybe do like $1 off of, a craft cocktail or something like that. But something that's not going to kill my margins, but also allows like, oh, they got these specials and this event. It pulls people in together to kind of fill in those low periods.
Do you run specials on the VR as well?
I only run it during happy hour. So I'm really trying to capture that, you're getting off of work, especially now that people are back in the office. When people weren't in the office, it failed. It did not work because they're working from home. I'm already working from home. I'm not going to get dressed up or put clothes. I hope you were wearing clothes, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to get ready to go out, especially when I'm already weary about going out. So that was when it wasn't working. But now, we run that special during happy hour only, and then it's our normal prices from there on out.
And so that makes sense. So you're kind of pairing the drink and the VR specials together at your slow times to try and drive more people in. Correct. And you said it seems to be working now that people are off work coming in for those happy hours.
It's better. And I think most entrepreneurs will say that we're never satisfied with where we are. It has definitely helped. We still have a ways to go, right? So a lot of that's marketing. So really getting it out in front of the right audiences, and there's so many different forums and ways that you can advertise your business. You don't know which one works, but you just got to keep swinging for the fence.
Yep. Throw it out there, try it, see what happens, and try it again, right? And I think what you said earlier is it's become what your customers wanted to become. And I can relate to that so much with Casey Crew is, we get feedback every week from our people, and we try and literally just listen to the customers and give them what they want.
Right.
And so I think it's a testament to like, you just want you want your customers to be happy. So you're modifying your business to essentially give it to them in a way that also meets your brand, which is awesome. I love that.
It's really funny. I'm just throw this in there because I was on another podcast last week and we talked about it. Well, this is one of the questions hopefully we'll get to, but I looked at my business plan for the first time in 3 years from when I first wrote it. And I'm currently going through revisions of it. And the vision that I had of Double Tap then and what it is today is completely different. It was just fascinating to what I envisioned this business being where we are today. It's completely different. And that is because we listened to our customer base, allowed them to like, what do you want from this experience when you come here? And it's helped me grow. So I do encourage everybody, if you wrote a business plan, go back and look at it every few years.
Yeah, the opposite for me, where I just started a softball league for some friends and didn't think it was going to be a business, and then it became one. I was like, oh crap, what am I doing?
Works,
So I'm like, should have had a business plan, but didn't think it was going to be a business. So obviously this is very tech driven. So how do you stay on top of all the new technology for VR and all the computers and everything you have to deal with? What are some of the ways you stay on top of that?
This is kind of a double-edged sword for me, if I'm being quite honest with you, because I think, as most people know, tech changes. I mean, you will buy something 6 months later, it's outdated. So it can be something where it sends you down a rabbit hole and you're constantly just trying to be innovative on the leading edge, if you will. But your average consumer can't afford that anyways. And on top of that, a lot of times the developers, even though the hardware has been updated, the software isn't there to back it. So I read forums. I obviously follow a lot of different YouTube channels as far as like CES out there in Vegas. They're always talking about the latest tech coming out. So I try to stay up to date, but also understand, all right, where's my budget? Is this something that fits in with our model? Mostly I focus on the VR side because that's the core part of the business, right? Where does that fit into our model? Can we afford to upgrade? Does it make sense? Is the software, is the games there to back that hardware? So that's kind of how I stay up to date and then make the decisions from there. We have a new experience I'll show you here in a minute, but is it time to release that into it?
Yeah, I can see. I just saw it. I didn't notice it earlier. That looks awesome. We'll definitely have to show that. Maybe that'll be something we do at the end. But you also mentioned events, which I'm an events guy. So, you've talked about trivia. You talked about a couple things on the public events. So how important are public events compared to private events for you?
They both work hand in hand, right? The private events, a lot of that is your corporations, team outings, not corporations, but just team outings and team building exercises. Those are huge for a business like us. Really any entertainment business, right? So your Topgolfs, your main events, the Double Taps of the world, those are huge for us because one, it serves a purpose. It keeps the business afloat. You're hopefully driving in revenue during your slow times, but also it allows you to get your name out there, and then those businesses to bring their team in. Especially with this, like VR it can be what you make it. if you followed along with it, which I'm sure you have, there's so many use cases in it. It's being used in corporations for collaborations and all the way to the entertainment side of things. So, it allows that team building exercise or that collaboration amongst companies. And so that's huge for us. The public side, that's where the trivias or those things, really getting those people out. Because like for me, if I'm not at work and I've been working from home all day, man, I just want to sit down. I don't want to go out. But so to me, those are important because it not forces, but it hopefully encourages people to come out and try something new, get together with a friend group, and just have a couple drinks and don't sit at home Monday through Friday. Because everybody knows in the bar and restaurant, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's when a lot of the money's made. So your Monday through Thursday are your slow periods. And so it kind of helps get people out of the house.
Sure. Are you using corporate events to kind of, you mentioned this earlier, to kind of fill your slow periods? Do you offer them before you open? I know you mentioned you open at 4 o'clock. So do you push most of your corporate events to those off-peak times, or do you allow them to book some of your times that are open to the public?
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the group, right? I mean, because we have to work within our capacity. So I mean, we get, we have 150 plus people. I'm like, we can't handle that comfortably. So it depends on the size of the group. But yeah, we do both. If there was 100 people, a lot of them, they're coming in from at noon because we don't open until 4. They'll be here during that time period. Then we get the place ready. Then we're open to the public. We have a space upstairs as well, which I think hopefully you guys got some B-roll of that. That space can be rented for birthday parties, corporate events, and that space can seat around 40 to 50 people. And that can be done during our regular business hours to where we're still open downstairs, but they have a private space up there as well.
So I know we mentioned, and that's awesome. I think corporate events, in my opinion, are, the challenge is like, it's a huge win, right? Company comes in and said, I'm going to give you all the money up front. Yeah. We're going to bring a bunch of people in who probably have never seen you before. So like, and it's coming at a time when you're not open. So it's a huge win. But the trouble is when they try and take a Friday night or a Saturday or the times that you're really, really busy. So how do you decide on whether you do that, or do you not allow that at all?
I mean, obviously in the middle of COVID, we took every dollar possible just to keep the doors open. But as we grow, the business gets busier. I make the decision based off the revenue because I have historical numbers now. But I typically don't. It depends on the size. But yeah, if it's a Friday, Saturday night, like a lot of times, man, they've been flexible, to be quite honest with you. They really do work with us pretty well. And it's like, hey, I can't do that on a Friday night, or you're going to have to rent out the entire facility. And if they have the money they want to fork out, I'm not going to say no. There have been a couple times where they do that, but for the most part, we really don't have much of an issue with that anytime people are requesting to rent out the place.
That's great. And yeah, it's always that balance of like, business or like, how do I make sure, it's like, all right, if you're going to pay me more money than I normally make, that's great for the business, but is it turning away my customers who rely on me to come in and they're looking forward to coming in? So it's one of those things is like, as a business, everybody makes that decision a little bit differently.
And I mean, you're fighting with yourself, right? Because you're looking at the numbers, but you're like, what's the detriment to the business if I'm going to close my doors to the public? And it's a Friday night. Like I can't do that when people are starting to come in there. They expect me to be open. Even if you post it on your socials, you have people that are out of town. They're like, hey, let's go check this place out. It seems cool. Oh, we're closed. It is a very tough decision.
Yep. I feel most customers, you can only get away with that 1 or 2 times and they're probably not coming back. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, difficult decision there. What's one solution you've implemented that you've been most proud of?
Oh, there's been a couple. I mean, I think for me personally, it's been the instructional video. Because when we first opened, it was my wife, myself, one other person. She would be bartending, I would be running the VR, vice versa. By the end of the weekend, so when they come in, they check in, we take them into their lane, we were giving instructional videos. I was doing that verbally. And by Sunday night, I was hoarse. I had no voice whatsoever. So it was record, because I would say the same thing over and over. And it just hit me one day. I'm like, why don't I just record this, put it on a video, hit the play button, come back when it's done. So ever since we've done that, it's allowed us to get more lanes started at the same time. Turnover's been much higher, faster. It's the same speech, so now I'm not reliant on my game host to give that speech, miss something gets broken because we didn't hit on it. So for me, I think that's been the biggest win. There's always been other little solutions that we've implemented, but that's been the biggest win.
I love that. Is the next step is like doing it in VR so they watch it in the headset with you in VR?
Absolutely. And it's close. The software allows us to put video or not video, excuse me. We can put ads and stuff within the launcher platform, not videos at this point, but the new headsets that we're implementing on that experience I was telling you, you actually can do that.
That would be really cool. So I know we talked about a couple things, but if you had to start all over today, what's one thing you'd do differently?
Man, for me, I think SOPs, just getting those standard operating procedures lined out. That's a double-edged sword, right? Because especially if it's a new concept, which we are, or we were at the time, it was like, you don't know what your SOPs need to be, right? But if I were to take this and do other, locations, getting those SOPs lined out, training, that's another one too. Making sure before you open those doors to the public, your staff's trained, they know your SOPs. And then the third thing for me would be marketing. We did marketing, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And so if I could do it all over again, hitting those different forms of marketing, realizing that you don't have to spend an arm and a leg on paid advertisements. Some of your guerrilla, your grassroots marketing, those are successful. For me, it was I just put stupid amounts of money into paid advertising, and it really kind of hurt the business a lot up front. So those are some things I would change if I had to do it again.
Thank you for that list. That's great. And so I can totally relate to all that. So it took me about 8 years to figure that out. I'm glad you figured it out quicker, but we just had 2 new employees start this week, and literally all they did was sit in trainings for 3 days that we've created. Right. And now after 3 days, they're able to essentially start working. And it used to be me sitting next to them for 8 hours a day for probably 2 weeks, explaining, saying it differently. Oh, I didn't ever teach you that. It was completely crazy and nightmare. But to your point, I struggled with for years of, if I create this SOP and it changes next week, now I got to go update my SOP. It makes no sense. And so internally, I was always battling, don't create it. I'm going to change it anyway.
Right.
But now I'm no, create it and then just update it. It takes maybe 10 minutes to update it. And that way you have this system that everybody can go look at. They're operating the same way efficiently. So I would 100% agree. Write an SOP just like you wrote a business plan. It's changed a lot, but essentially update it, try and stick to it the best possible. And then training, like you said, video. Most of our training is all video training because to your point now, it's not relying on my time or your time or whoever's time it takes to train them. They just sit and absorb it at their own time and their own pace, and then they can do a little challenge, a little quiz. That's one of the things we implemented is everybody learns differently. So we have it in video, we have it written, and then we have a task for them to do afterwards so they can actually go do the action too. And so that's been a huge game changer of they fully understand it and they didn't need any of my help. Yep. So that's, to me, I've been really excited about seeing that lately. So I'll definitely echo those. To your marketing side, what's been like you mentioned a bunch of things, but what's the number one thing you feel like your marketing today has been helpful? The number one thing that's helped you?
Obviously social media, right? So Instagram, Facebook. For those that aren't, I hate to say this, but if you follow Gary Vee, my God, he hits on it a lot, right? But the social media platforms we have today, if you're not on it, you are missing out. So those have been the most successful, but it's also a double-edged sword as well. It's you got to be careful about how much money you're putting into those paid ads and keeping an eye on, you're going to see the numbers, what are the conversion rates? What are your clicks, your views, average time? That's all great. It's giving you numbers, but that doesn't mean it's leading into dollars, gained for the business. So for me, we've also experienced other different avenues, right? So radio, billboards, oh my God. I've tried a lot of different ones, and be careful there. Because there's some cases where I've overspent, and it's almost, I've spent months recovering about how much I spent on that. It was a hard lesson learned, but yeah, it put us in a really tight financial situation for those months. So, it's a balance, man. I social media for sure, get on those. Understanding organic too. There's a lot of groups and stuff that you can be a part of to post into that can get a lot of eyes, but it just takes my time. Create a flyer, post it in there. I don't need to put a paid ad behind it. So I think that's kind of been the biggest learning curve for me.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's so many options out there, and I'd love your thoughts on this, but I think bang for buck, it's 100% social media.
Yeah.
Spending dollars for advertising and actually knowing what happened to it is social media. Because to you, I feel like I forget every year, and I'm let's try a billboard, let's try a TV or whatever, right? And then it's well, how many people saw it? How many people clicked on it? How many people landed on there's no way to track it, and it seems way more expensive than me running these ads. And so, my opinion, I think it's the level of business that you're at, depending on where you put your dollars.
Agreed.
Small startup, I think everybody should be using social media, but once you're to a point where you just want extra exposure, you want name recognition, billboards, TV, radio. So I think it's a level thing for me, and I'd love your thoughts.
No, that actually makes the most sense, and I never thought about it that way, but that's something I had to learn the hard way. Because you're going to get, especially the longer you're in business, the more that name gets out there, that's when those ad agencies are going to start to approach you. I mean, I get approached weekly. Hey, you want to put a flyer in here for Lowe's Hotel, or, hey, we've got these billboards, radio, man, that's the way to go. I promise you, like, we're getting this amount of users. For example, we did 6 months of radio advertising on a sports radio network. And we put a coupon code in that radio ad that they could use online or in person. It was used 0 times. 0. And I spent thousands of dollars on that radio ad. Like, it is a level thing. Now, granted, just because they don't use it doesn't mean it wasn't a net positive for your business, because that name's out there. I mean, people have to hear or see something an average of 3 to 5 times before they would ever even think about going to act on or see your business. So I love that. Yeah, leveling up makes so much sense. It was something that I've just had to learn the hard way these past 2 years.
Same. Like I said, I forget. I feel like every year and try something new, and I'm like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
But hey, you don't know until you try, right? You got to try it. So what's the next 3 years look like for Double Tap, Casey?
Great question. Yeah, we're currently, like I said, the reason I had to go revisit that business plan is because we're working on an expansion. During our peak season, we do fill the bays, which is fantastic, but I'm at capacity at that point, right? So I really that's when it becomes limited throughput, because, I mean, I only have so many bays available. So we're working on an expansion upstairs, different VR experiences, because right now our main experience is the group-based, kind of like arcade, multiple games you could play together. The big thing right now is free roam. That's what everybody wants to get into. So we'll have a free roam space up there, a full kitchen, because this it does the job, but something that could feed that, 300 plus people in the restaurant. A couple other different experiences, full wraparound bar. That is within I'd say, the next 12 to 15 or 18 months. And then hopefully from there, we're going to start opening second, third location.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing what you do. I love it when people create these really cool experiences for people. It's not easy. So thank you for doing that. And thank you so much for being here on the Facility Playbook. We'll see you next time. Yeah. Boom. Throwing axes at you.
That's right.